歡迎嚟到不左不右。今日下晝1點20分，川普喺佢嘅 Truth Social 上面宣布話，因為中國對世界市場缺乏尊重，美國對中國嘅關稅已經提高到125%。相反，由於已經超過有75個國家同美國代表商談關稅，並且尋求解決方案，而且呢啲國家並冇以任何方式對美國進行報復。我已經授權實施為期90日嘅暫停措施，並且將相互關稅減到10%。咁呢件事對世界局勢有乜影響呢？而家我哋就嚟聽聽美國財長 Scott Bessent 喺今日做嘅3個唔同嘅採訪，或者我哋可以得到一啲啟示。
Again, President Trump created maximum negotiating leverage for himself, and which tariffs went into effect 15 hours ago. The ones that we have lowered went into effect a week ago. They were announced a week ago, and we have just been overwhelmed by the response from mostly our allies who want to come and negotiate in good faith. So we are expecting them to come with their best deal. As I said a week ago today, don't retaliate, hold your ground, let's see what happens. And China, they kept escalating, and now they have 125% tariffs that will be effective immediately. We've had more than 75 countries contact us, and I imagine after today there will be more. So it is just a processing problem. Each one of these solutions is going to be bespoke. It is going to take some time, and President Trump wants to be personally involved. So that's why we're getting the 90-day pause. Look, it's all the president's decision. And the president had a level in mind to raise the China tariffs, and then he had the 3-month pause in mind, and we were discussing the exact wording. Sorry?
The 3-month pause was divided.
Of course.
It's the president's decision.
It's the president's decision. It was the president's decision to wait until today. And again, as I've said in the past, no one creates leverage for himself like President Trump. Again, this was driven by the president's strategy. He and I had a long talk on Sunday, and this was his strategy all along. And that, you might even say that he goaded China into a bad position. They responded. They have shown themselves to the world to be the bad actors, and we are willing to cooperate with our allies and with our trading partners who did not retaliate. It wasn't a hard message. Don't retaliate. Things will turn out well. These are trade negotiations, but if countries want to come and offer other things, I talked about yesterday that we are thinking about a big LNG project in Alaska that South Korea, Japan, Taiwan are interested in financing and taking a substantial portion of the offtake. But again, in essence, that is trade because it will decrease the trade deficit that we have with those countries. So everything's on the table. China's decision that we have the deficit with them. They sell us almost 5 times what we sell them. So again, I think it's an own goal by China. Well, I think what we've seen, I think the willingness by more than 75 countries to come and negotiate, I think now the market understands that everything they saw last Wednesday was a ceiling, and now we have a 10% the temporary floor. And I think the market, my 35 years in the market, I always wanted certainty. So I think we've got more certainty. In terms of certainty, we will see what China does. But what I'm certain of is that what China is doing will affect their economy much more than it will ours because they have an export-driven, flood the world with cheap export models, and the rest of the world now understands because when we put up our tariff wall, those exports were already flowing to the rest of the G7 and to the global south. We have a meeting with Vietnam today, and we have one of the largest trade deficits with them. So I'm hoping it will move in a good direction. I was at the Japanese ambassador's house last night for the Cherry Blossom Festival, which was quite festive. And he and I had a good chat. They are going to send a deal team over. So we'll see. These are complicated negotiations. These are imbalances that have taken decades to create. But I think having seen the maximum level that Donald Trump is willing to go to, President Trump has created this negotiating leverage.
I think it's unfortunate that the Chinese actually don't want to come and negotiate because they are the worst offenders in the international trading system. They have the most imbalanced economy in the history of the modern world. And I can tell you that this escalation is a loser for them. That they have some very smart, the economists, the academicians, technocrats within their bureaucracy, and they would be telling the leadership that we do not have the edge here. They are the surplus country, that their exports to the U.S. are 5 times our exports to China. So they can raise their tariffs, but so what? We have the response to the countries who want to come and sit at the table rather than escalate has been overwhelming.
Yeah.
Our allies, Japan, South Korea, India, and I will note that they are all around China. We have Vietnam coming today.
Yeah.
So everyone is coming to the table, and basically China's surrounded. Our allies, part of our discussion as our allies come in and talk to us, is how do we get China to rebalance? That is the big win here.
Yeah.
That the U.S. is trying to rebalance toward more manufacturing. China needs to rebalance towards more consumption. If at a point we can move to that, then we can move together. Well, look, they were in a recession/depression due to a real estate collapse that had a real estate bubble that is deflating. That had been going on for years, and the economy was in terrible shape. So again, they're going to go from bad to terrible, and that which is unsustainable will be unsustainable. The other thing that the Chinese should not do is try to devalue their way out of this, because back to our European friends, our Japanese allies, our Korean allies, the Vietnamese, if China starts devaluing, then that is a tax on the rest of the world, and everyone will have to keep raising their tariffs to offset the devaluation.
Yeah.
So I would urge them not to do that and to come to the table.
In terms of this soft war with China, we've got Chinese stocks trading on U.S. exchanges. U.S. investors are buying those stocks, and that's helping China fund its military. Let's face it. Are you willing to go that far to remove Chinese stocks from U.S. exchanges?
Maria, I think everything's on the table. We are putting in process export controls for high value security-related goods. We are talking about the export capital controls in terms of, as you said, a blacklist of things that U.S. Whether pension funds, endowments, investors should not be investing in to fund the Chinese military machine. But that'll be President Trump's decision. And you know what, Maria, at the end of the day, President Trump, Chairman Xi have a very good personal relationship, and I am confident that this will be resolved at the highest level. If we think about President Trump's agenda, tariffs came first. Now we're going to get tax done. We are pushing for deregulation, and the deregulation, unfortunately, takes longer to kick in. But I tell you, when it does, it's going to be powerful. And part of the deregulation in the banking industry will be the changing what's called the supplementary leverage ratio, which will allow banks to buy more treasuries without a big capital charge. So, I would expect that we have created a new buyer for treasury securities, or a larger, more durable buyer.
Whether or not China is dumping treasuries, is that what you see right now? Is China dumping treasuries to try to put pressure on this market?
Maria, I think it works against their purposes if they are dumping treasuries, because if they're dumping treasuries, then they have to buy something else. If they sell dollars, then they strengthen their currency. And as I said earlier, they've actually been weakening their currency, which is a loser for everyone.
Right.
And again, when I hear all these stories, the dollar is no longer going to be the reserve currency. If you end up with the Chinese who are willing to use their currency as a trade tool, that doesn't seem like a very good reserve asset to me. I think what the CEO may have alluded to, and I've said it in the past, that the manufacturing sector under the previous administration was in a recession. So what we are doing is what I call reprivatizing the economy. 80% of the job creation was either government jobs or government adjacent, which is education and healthcare. And this massive amount of government borrowing. So we are also getting the deficit under control, right-sizing the federal workforce, and then on the other side, they are going to re-lever the private sector through smart, safe, and sound bank deregulation. And then, as this CEO said, they can come out of recession because I expect that long-term interest rates should come down as we get the budget under control, inflation under control, energy prices come down, and then the private sector will have room to grow. But in terms of escalation, unfortunately, the biggest offender in the global trading system is China, and they're the only country who's escalated. And I can tell the rest of the world that I'm not sure whether it was the prime minister or the economic minister in Spain made some comments this morning, oh, well, maybe we should align ourselves more with China. That would be cutting your own throat, because I can tell you that these Chinese exports that the U.S. tariff wall is going to keep out, that China, for all of you who can remember that Disney movie of the brooms carrying the buckets of water, that is the Chinese business model. It never stops. They just keep producing and producing and dumping, and it's going somewhere. And I think, Rob, at the end of the day, that we can probably reach a deal with our allies, with the other countries that have been long-term. They've been good military allies, not perfect economic allies, and then we can approach China as a group. And one of the reasons I came out from behind my desk was this incredible fiscal, the prolificacy and irresponsibility that the last administration did, 6.7% deficit to GDP. We have never seen when we weren't at war or in a recession, and they just spent. So what we're trying to do is bring down government spending, they right-size the federal workforce, and then on the other side, as I just described, through safe, smart, and sound financial deregulation, make it possible for you all to re-leverage the private sector. So we want to deleverage the government sector, re-leverage the private sector, but we can't do it all at once. And I tell these congressmen, I tell the senators, look, our fiscal situation is a 350-pound, 2-pack-a-day smoker on the ICU table, and he or she is not going to get off that table and run the Ironman. And we're going to get on a treadmill. We are going to bring the deficit to GDP hopefully down by 1% every year and get it back toward the long-term target of 3.5%. What will keep us from having a recession is making sure that the tax bill doesn't expire, adding back 100% depreciation, and then adding some of President Trump's agenda, no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime.